I see that there are 3 people here already. This is David Cashman with SEB Housing. We're doing the information session for the affordable units at the Bradford. We're still just a few minutes early, and I have to get a few more things set up, but we will be starting momentarily, so thanks for your patience.
Did you just press like go live on that or something?
Actually, do you want to go in and just make sure that you can hear me? You can hear me, Brian? Yeah. Okay. Just while we're getting set up here, folks, to the right of the screen, there's a dialog box. If you have questions,
please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign. If you are the host, press star now. Otherwise, please enter your PIN followed by the pound or hash. If you do not know, thank you. There is one other participant in the conference. Please announce yourself.
Hello, this is Dave from SEB Housing. Okay, so the live feed is live. I see that there are 3 people there. We have another household on the conference call. My phone says it's 6:29, so I'm going to give it just a few more minutes to see if any other households join. I think that I was trying to dial into the conference call when I was trying to say something earlier. Sorry about that. But what I was trying to say is you should see a dialogue live chat box to the right of the screen. I think there's an opportunity to type underneath the video screen where you see my face, but also to the right of it. And I'm just addressing the folks who are attending by live stream on YouTube right now. So if you type to the right of the screen, I should be able to see any questions or comments that people have. And certainly, if you do have them, please feel free to write them in. And for the household, I believe there's one household on the conference call. I'm going to do my best to kind of address everyone. It's a little bit clunky to be trying to address a computer audience and a household on the conference call, but we're trying to make this as accommodating to everyone as possible. So same goes for you. If you have a question, you can just sort of announce yourself and say you have a question, and I will try and repeat the question and answer it so that people who are attending by live feed can hear that as well. Again, this is the information session for the Bradford in Belmont, and we're going to get started in just a minute here. I know that the announcement on the library site just went up today, and I don't know, hopefully households were able to get notice, but I want to just give a couple more moments here in case there are some other households trying to join. So just give me one moment and we'll get started. Thank you. I can hear you. Do you want to type something?
Do I need to put it on pause?
Put what on pause, ma'am?
Just leave it open then the whole time. Okay.
Yeah, and we're going to get started here in just a moment. I just want to check one more thing.
I'm a senior and I don't see out of my left eye, so.
Oh, are you able to, are you in front of a computer?
I am in front of a computer. I'm also on the phone.
Okay. So if you are in front of the computer and you go to YouTube,
Yeah, yeah.
if you just search SEB housing, you should see a number of videos that pop up. Obviously, you want to click on the one that says Belmont Bradford, and then you can join.
Yeah, I see it.
Yep.
And live now, and just get live.
Yep.
So how? Just click on it live now. Okay.
And for the household,
you're there.
Okay, great. And you can hear me on both places now.
Right.
Good. For the household who, there was a household who had asked and then they retracted it, but just in case, if you want to join by call, you call 425-436-6200. The PIN number is 862627. Okay, so we'll get started. Again, my name is David Cashman. I work with SEB Housing. We are the lottery agent who has been hired by the developers of the Bradford to assist in marketing and running a lottery for the affordable units within the Bradford. As you all know, we typically do these in person, and in this case, it's scheduled to do it at the library, but obviously with the outbreak of COVID, that is not possible. So thanks for being flexible and doing it in this other manner. Obviously, this is an evolving situation, and we don't know exactly where we'll be in a week or even a month from now, but you should know that our office will be open. We will all be working from home, but doing our very best to move forward and respond to people as quickly as we possibly can. On that note, if you have an application or anything that you want to submit to us, right now, the best way to get that to us is to scan it and email it to us. The email is on the very first page of the lottery application at the bottom, but it is info@sebhousing.com. Again, that's info@sebhousing.com. That's really going to be the best way for the foreseeable future of communicating with us and or sending documentation in, because we will not be at the office. If you send anything in that requires a signature or to be delivered to someone in hand at the office, we're not going to be here. So chances are that will get returned to you. If it is something that doesn't require a signature or to be given to someone in hand, it may sit in our box, and if and when someone can come in, we will get to it. But again, best way for now is to scan and email. So I think that's kind of all I have to say as far as that. And now I'm going to get into some of the general information about this opportunity, what to expect, who can apply, and what the different parameters are. The most important thing that I could say, and I say this in all the info sessions, is if you think you're interested after looking through these materials and or attending this session, the most important thing you can do is just get an application in. Applications are due by 2 p.m. on May 4th. The only way we can ensure that that you won't get to move forward in this opportunity is if you don't submit an application. So if you think you're interested, please do apply. If you have questions, we're here to work with you. If there's anything that's left incomplete in your application, we'll work with you on helping you fill it so that you can complete it prior to that May 4th deadline. Affordable housing, in case affordable housing means different things to different people, but in this particular program, what that means is that these units, and there are 12 of them being offered through this opportunity, are being offered at reduced rents, and they're being offered to households that meet certain income and asset parameters that we'll get into as we go along here. It does not mean that the units are subsidized. It does not mean that the rents are tied to your particular financial situation. We'll talk a little bit about what those rents are, but those don't change based on your particular picture. And it's important to understand that in this program, anyone moving forward is expected to have sufficient income assets to pay their own way. The second page of the information packet, which again you can find on our website, www.sebhousing.com, or if that doesn't work for you, if you want to email info@sebhousing.com, we can send you one. But hopefully you have it in front of you. The second page provides a really nice synopsis of kind of what to expect in this process. That's sort of a nice overall guide in case in looking through this you ever feel like you're getting into the weeds and there's a lot of information, I recognize, but that page gives you a nice overall summary and is a good page to kind of check in on if at any time you're looking for sort of a big picture of what this process looks like. Before we get into some of the specific eligibility criteria and some of the nitty-gritty for applying for this program, I'll give you a little bit of background about the actual development. We don't work at the development. We're not the builder, so I don't have as intimate of knowledge about some of the details that the management team would have. But if people do have those questions, I can certainly follow up with them and try and get back to you. But I can say that I actually drove by it just this weekend. It looks great. Obviously, Belmont's a really nice town, and it's in a very desirable part of Belmont. And it looks like they're really moving along, and the building has definitely taken shape. You're close to a lot of nice, within walking distance to a lot of amenities within Belmont, and also close to places like Harvard Square, Fresh Pond, and not too far from downtown Boston. The units themselves are going to be beautiful. They have wood-style flooring, stainless steel appliances, washer and dryer in the unit, quartz countertops in the kitchens. And the community itself has a number of amenities, including fire pit areas, a resident lounge, private sun deck, courtyard, and plazas. There is also parking on site. If you look, so I'm just looking at page 4 of the information packet. As I said before, there's going to be 12 units made available through this opportunity. Those break down in a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units. There's 1 studio unit, 5 1-bedroom units, and 6 2-bedroom units. Of those 6 2-bedroom units, 2 are built out with features for persons with handicaps. As I said before at the beginning, the rents for these units, you can see them in the column all the way to the right. They are $1,470 for a studio, $1,673 for a 1-bedroom, and $1,862 for a 2-bedroom. Those do not include the costs of heat, water heating, and cooking, but water and sewer are included. I do want to make one quick note about the rents. The rents are, as I said, they're not tied to your particular financial picture. Rather, they're tied to limits, or area median incomes that's published by HUD once a year, typically in April. Those can and often do go up by a little bit. So if you are someone who moves forward in this process and rents a unit, it is not unreasonable to expect that each year your rent is going to change a little bit, and you will be given advance notice of what that change is, so you can determine if it still makes sense for you and if it's still something, a place that you'd like to live. In most years, that rent will go up by a little bit. I can't say exactly how much, but could be $20, could be $40, could be $60. It all just depends on the year and what happens with those HUD numbers. But also factored in are the utility allowances that the local housing authority publishes. And depending on what happens with those can also impact your rents. But the takeaway there is rents do change year to year, usually not in a drastic amount, and you would be given notice. But as I'll get into a little bit more later, if you do move forward in this process, the income limits that apply to you and your continued eligibility for this program also change. And they change in a way that allows you to make more money. So even if the rents were to go up a little bit, you could still maintain eligibility, even making more income than you could right now to qualify for the program. And again, I don't see any questions yet on the live chat, but if anyone has anything that they want to ask me, please do. I'll be happy to respond, or if you want to wait till the end, that's fine too. So there's a number of general parameters about who's eligible for this program. Probably the biggest ones are you have to qualify in terms of your income and your assets. Income for this year, and this could change relatively soon, but the income limit right now for a household size of 1 is $62,450, and then $71,400 for a household size of 2, $80,300 for a household size of 3, and $89,200 for a household size of 4. Income is everyone who's going to be living in the unit. And by program rules, you should know we have to count income rather expansively. So some of the things that some people may not necessarily think of as income under this program do count as income. So if you recently got a bonus or several bonuses this year, that could be something that would count. If you were unemployed for a period of time, that is something that could count as income. If you were receiving periodic payments from a benefactor or a family member, a lot of people might not think of that as income. That is income. If you have an asset source that generates income, we have to count that towards the income limit. Or if you're receiving child support or alimony, that also counts as income, or social security. We've listed unemployment's another one. There are a number. The application has a whole table that lists all the various sources of income. And again, these are by program guidelines. So we're not making these up. The program requires us to count income expansively. As you can see in our application in the first table, the sources are varied. Make sure that when you're filling that out to take your time and kind of think through what all your various sources of income can be and fill that in so that it's accurate. Now may be a good time to just point out that unlike a lot of lotteries that we run, you don't actually have to submit documentation verifying what you put in your application here. We will take what you put basically on face value in your application, and based on what you put, make a determination about whether you're eligible to be placed in this lottery. But if you move forward and are able to reserve a unit, at that point, you would be required to submit all of the income and asset documentation that verifies what you've put in your application. And obviously, at that point, if you said you make, if you're a household size of 1 and you put on your application that you make $60,000, we'd say, okay, you're under the income limit of $62,450. But if at the time that you need to demonstrate with documentation what your income is, and it turns out you make 70,000, then unfortunately at that point we're going to have to deny you as being over income, and you don't want to have spent kind of all that time and maybe getting your hopes up of moving forward if that's going to be the eventuality. So I guess the takeaway is just do your very best to try and be as accurate as possible when you're listing what your income and what your assets are in your application, in many ways as a service to yourself, so you don't spend all this time going through the process and it turns out, we have to decide that your income is actually many $1,000s above what you said, and you're disqualified as a result. I have talked a little bit about assets. There's actually no particular asset limitation for this lottery because it's a rental development. However, we do need to look at the actual income or imputed income that's generated from your assets and add that to the income limits. So we don't need to sort of explore that too much in detail, because in the vast majority of cases, people are not generating lots and lots of income from their assets. And so it doesn't usually become an issue. It's just more to mention it so that you're aware of it, that's a large reason why we do need to ask about assets, to see what income is actually being generated and to add that to your income total. But it's pretty unusual, not impossible, but unusual, that the income generated from assets, either the actual income or imputed income of 0.06%, whichever of those two is higher, is going to bump anyone over the income limit. So it's not something that comes up very often. I've talked a little bit about the maximum income limits. And just one other note about that, we do look at your historical income, but mostly as indicative of what you're expected to make over the next 12 months. So that's sort of the calculation that we're trying to make when we screen your application to determine eligibility, as a projection going forward over the next 12 months. But obviously, what you've made in the recent past is as good an indicator as any of what you're going to make going forward. So, if you've been making $80,000 and you say to us, but I'm actually going to make $50,000 next year, you need to have some very solid documentation that shows why that's credible. Usually we have to take what you've made in the past as an indicator of what you're going to make going forward, and sort of unsupported claims that it's probably going to go down. Anyone could just make that claim. So usually what you've made in the recent past is an indicator of what's to be made going forward. So I was talking a little bit about maximum incomes. There's a note as well to be said about minimum incomes, and there is a page on this in our information packet. The program doesn't specifically have minimum income requirements. However, as I said towards the beginning, you do still need to have enough in income and assets to be able to support the rent, and that comes from the leasing office. The specific number that they're using here is 2.5 times the monthly rent. Someone needs to make 2.5 times the monthly rent in order to be able to support the rent themselves. So what that translates to is, for a studio unit, a little over $44,000 a year. For a one bedroom, that's a little over $50,000 a year. And for a two bedroom, that's a little over $55,000 or close to $56,000 a year. Again, that is to show that you have enough in income and assets. If you're underneath those numbers, but you have a lot of money saved up in a checking account or a savings account or some other place that you can access, we're not going to screen you out based on that, because you may be able to draw down from those other sources to make up that deficiency. Similarly, we are not screening for minimum income nearly as closely as we are for maximum income, because as I said, maximum income is a program requirement. We have to make sure that you're under a certain amount to qualify. For minimum income, we're trying to make sure on behalf of the leasing office that you're not going to spend this time moving forward only to make sure, only to find out that you don't have enough to support the rent. But as it's not a program requirement, if you're close, we'll probably say that's fine. But it may be something that comes up later on in the process if you move forward applying for a lease, and the leasing office is going to want to make sure that you do have enough. Another note here that does come up from time to time, people ask if they can have a co-signer on their lease. The program strictly prohibits that. So if you're someone who maybe wouldn't have enough on your own to be able to support the rent or some other issue that in other cases might be ameliorated by having a co-signer, this program does not allow that. When you fill out your application on one of the first pages, you're going to indicate the unit sizes that you're interested in. And this is an important point. You can select one, you can select two, you can select all three. And there is absolutely no downside to selecting more. So if you have any inclination that you could be interested in any of these different bedroom sizes, it is to your benefit to select all three. And again, there is no downside to doing so. When we do the lottery, we'll create different waiting lists. We'll have different waiting lists for the studio, the 1-bedroom, and the 2-bedroom. And you could, if you qualify for all three, be on all three. And at some point, you'll be probably given a decision about which one is of most interest to you and could move forward with that unit size. But if you don't select, for example, a specific unit size, you won't be on that waiting list, and you won't have an opportunity to move forward for that bedroom size. So it is, if you think there's any chance that you could be interested in a particular bedroom size, you should absolutely check it off. If later on in the process you decide you're not interested in, say, a 1-bedroom, but you want a studio, you can just say, I'm not interested in the 1-bedroom, and I'll wait for my opportunity to come up on a studio. So it's again, your benefit to fill in as many of the bedroom sizes that you think that you might be interested in. When you another thing, when you fill out the application, you'll indicate the type of household that you are. For this particular lottery, there are type 2 households and type 1 households. Without getting too into the details, generally by program guidelines, what that means is a type 2 household is a household who needs 2 bedrooms. So any household with 4 members is going to need 2 bedrooms. Any household with 3 bedrooms by program guidelines is going to need 2 bedrooms. You know, a parent and a child is going to need 2 bedrooms, but a married couple by program guidelines really only needs 1 bedroom, and a 1-person household by program guidelines really only needs 1 bedroom. When we run the lottery, the import of that is that there will be priority given for the 2-bedroom units to households who are type 2. So every household that applies for a 2-bedroom unit will be above every household who's a type 1 who applies for a 2-bedroom unit, without regard to where they were specifically drawn in the lottery. And I'll get into that a little bit more shortly. So that is to say, a type 1 household can apply for a 2-bedroom unit. They just won't have a priority for it. They'll be behind those larger households who need, by program rules, the 2 bedrooms. But they would be on equal footing as all other household sizes for a studio unit or a one-bedroom unit. When you apply for the lottery, again, we'll review it. If there's something that's incomplete, we will let you know. But otherwise, if we review it and we determine that you're eligible, you will get a lottery application number. That number will be in the form of A dot number, let's say A001 or A005 or whatever the case may be. Those numbers have absolutely no bearing on where you are in the lottery or your opportunity to move forward. They are nothing more than anonymous ways of identifying eligible people for the lottery. And there's no preference given to households in the order that they actually submit their applications either. Rather, you have until May 4th, I think it is, to submit May 4th to submit a application. Every household will get an anonymous lottery number. On May 26th, when we run the lottery, and again, on that front, just kind of going back, I don't know where we'll be on May 26th. I don't know if we'll be able to have public meetings again, but just know that if you are in the lottery, we will be communicating with you. And if we do need to do a lottery drawing like we're doing here, then you will be provided that information about how to attend telephonically or via the computer. So for the lottery, every household will have their anonymous identifier number. We will, on the day of the lottery, we're going to run two drawings. One is a local preference drawing, and one is everyone else, including the local preference households. There is, like there is a priority for larger households who need two-bedroom units, there is also priority for local households in this lottery. Those are households who live in Belmont, work in Belmont, or have a kid attending the Belmont schools. Those households would get priority relative to similarly situated households, meaning households of the same type for a particular unit. So what that means in practice, just by way of an example, is in this lottery, there's going to be 4 two-bedroom apartments that have a local preference priority. What that means is that all type 2 households who are local preference for Belmont, meaning live in Belmont, work in Belmont, or have kids attending the Belmont schools, are going to be in that very first tier of households who get invited to move forward to apply for leases. And again, they could be the last households drawn. It won't matter because of the way that we're required to sort the results. They will immediately leapfrog all other households and be in that first tier. Similarly, all type 2 households, again, for a 2-bedroom apartment, even if it's a local preference apartment, all type 2 households who are not local preference would be above all type 1 households. Again, it doesn't matter where you're drawn in the lottery. We have to sort the results according to the required preferences. Following them would be type 1 households who are local preference. And in the last category would be type 1 households who are not local preference. So this really isn't like most other lotteries that we think of. There aren't winners, there aren't losers. It's not as though we only draw a certain number of names and those are the only names that, or those are the only people that get to move forward. Instead, every household who's eligible for the lottery will be picked. They will have a spot on one or several waiting lists, depending on whether they apply for only one type of unit or several types of units. And those waiting lists will just determine the order that households get to move forward. And by that, I mean get to move forward and being invited to apply for a lease. Again, that's another area, just like where I mentioned with the lottery. I don't know where we'll be in roughly June when that would probably be taking place, but we will be communicating with the developer and with any households who are in the lottery to try and get you information about what that process is going to look like, which obviously will be impacted by what's happening with coronavirus and whether or not people can meet. So that will be something we'll address later. But again, just want to kind of reiterate, because it's very different from most other lotteries. Every household in the lottery will get a position on a waiting list. It may not be the highest position, it may not be the position that they most wanted, but they will have a position. And what's important about that too is that, again, no one is submitting income and asset documentation with their lottery application. They have to supply that later. That, coupled with many other factors in our experience, shows that for a number of reasons, sometimes households don't move forward, even households who have great waiting list positions. Maybe they decide to move somewhere else. Maybe something happens. They decide they just don't want to live there. Maybe they actually said they made $50,000, but we review and they make $80,000. So the point is, even if you don't have one of those very top waiting list positions, that is not reason to despair. There is still a chance, and maybe a good chance, that some of the households ahead of you may not end up reserving and leasing units. And if they don't, we'll keep working through our lists until all the units are filled. So it's important to kind of be patient if you're interested, because again, chances are not every household ahead of you will end up leasing a unit. For households who do get invited to move forward, at that point, we would put you in contact after the lottery with the leasing office, and you would work with them in taking that next step in applying for a lease. Usually they give you about 5 days to come in and reserve the unit of your choosing. Again, we'll see how that's impacted by what's going on right now, but that's sort of the usual way that this works out. And again, the reason to have those timelines is, it wouldn't be fair to all the other households in the lottery for the top household to take 2 weeks or a month to decide to go in and tour the building and see which unit they want. We have to have this process move forward. So if you are in the lottery and you do have a sort of a higher spot on the waiting list, it's important to keep in mind that the process keeps moving. That's not the end of the process, and you do have to comply with any deadlines that are given to you by the leasing office. Another important point on this front is, if you're the top household on a specific waiting list, let's just say, for example, you have the top spot on the waiting list for a local preference 2-bedroom apartment, and you get called into the leasing office to apply for a lease, if you're eligible, you can reserve from any of the available 2-bedroom apartments at that point. Once you've and that could be, if the units, a lot of times they're not all ready at exactly the same time. So even if your unit of choice may, if it's not ready for a month or 2 months or even 3 months, whatever the case may be, you can reserve that unit if that's the one you want. So these are not pre-selected. The advantage of kind of having a higher spot on the waiting list is you can choose from any of the available units on that list. And once you do that, then the next household behind you can choose from whatever's left, and so on and so forth. Once households have reserved units, that's when the income and asset documentation has to be provided to us so we can do the final review for program eligibility. When you if you apply and are eligible for the lottery, we will send you a documentation requirements guide that really details exactly the documentation that needs to be submitted. And if and when you are someone who is able to reserve a unit, you're only going to have 2 weeks to submit all of that documentation. And again, for better or worse, there's a lot of documentation. It's not unlike the amount of documentation you would need to get a mortgage. That's what is required by the program. So if you are eligible for the lottery, when you get that documents requirements guide, I really urge you to take a look at it closely and start collecting some of that stuff. Because if you wait until further down the road, when you would reserve a unit, and only at that point do you say, now I need to collect all of these items, it's doable, but there's a lot, and many people need more time. And sometimes you submit one piece of documentation and that raises other questions, and now you have to get additional documents. So really urge you to begin to think, if you're someone who's entered into the lottery, take a close look at that guide that we send you and start collecting that documentation, or think about how you'd get it, so that if you're one of the people who moves forward through the lottery process and reserves a unit, you've already put the wheels in motion and know where to get those things that we're going to ultimately need to qualify you. And that's sort of almost the final step. Once we've qualified you, then you could go back and sign a lease for the unit that you've chosen. I had mentioned earlier that there are the income limits, and we spoke a little bit about that. And I had said also that if you're someone who moves forward in this and ends up leasing a unit, every year you're required to recertify and show that you're still eligible for the program. Once you've kind of gone through it the first time, any future reviews should be easier. But as I had mentioned, your eligibility insofar as your income is determined, you get a nice bump in what that ceiling is. So just by way of example, whereas for a one-person household, the initial certification income limit to be eligible today to be entered into the lottery and move forward is $62,450. But if you were someone who, using that same number, if you were recertifying today as a one-person household, meaning you were already living in that unit for the last year and now you're just having to show that you're still eligible, you can make up to $87,000 for $87,430. So that's a pretty nice boost. So what that means is if you end up getting a unit and you're living at this development, and at some point while you're living there, maybe you get a pay raise or something, and your income goes up, you still have a cushion that allows you to remain program eligibility on that future review. I touched a little bit on local preference. You can read a little bit more about it on page 17 of the information packet. Someone who meets all of the local preference criteria does not get priority over someone who just meets one of the local preference criteria. Again, like the income and the income especially that you claim in your application, it doesn't do you any justice to say that you qualify for local preference now in an effort to get priority status through the lottery, because you will have to demonstrate that you meet that local preference priority later on in the process, if and when you reserve a unit. And if it turns out that you said that you were a resident of Belmont and you're not, then you're going to end up losing that reservation. So just be straightforward about, for your own benefit, about if you do meet the local preference requirements or not. I think that's everything I've got for right now. If I don't see anyone has asked a question, I hope I haven't missed it on the live feed here. Again, if you're trying to type a question, you have to type it to the right of where you see the video screen with me. If you type below it, that's like a comment that I can't see. If you're going to post one of those, please keep it positive. But yeah, just keep it to the right, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, or if anyone on the conference call has a question, I'm happy to try and address those. Or if you're not quite sure if you have any questions right now, you can always follow up. I'll actually give you my direct email is david@sebhousing.com, and you can also email info@sebhousing.com, and be more than happy to address any questions that you have. But again, if you think you're interested, the most important thing is get your application in. You don't need to submit all the income and asset documentation now. So the application process at this particular moment is a lot less painful than it usually is to get into lotteries. So we hope you apply, and happy to work with you. And I'm going to just kind of wait for a moment to see if anyone has any questions. But if not, I hope that you found this session useful and informative, and I hope that if you're interested, you apply. So thanks for those who attended, and good luck moving forward. Right. Folks, I don't see any questions, so I think if there aren't any, I will end this. I will end the call, and I will end the live stream. But again, really appreciate the folks who tuned in. And again, we will be working, not at the actual office, but we will be working and available. David at SEB Housing, feel free to write me an email if you have any questions, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So thanks, and everyone stay safe out there, and appreciate you tuning in. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.